Welcome to the Beyond the Veil Summit, a free online event where you'll explore the mysteries surrounding near-death experiences, mediumship, and the science of the afterlife. Share this event with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Lisa Bonnice.
Welcome to this session of the Beyond the Veil Summit with my guest, Carrie Paris. Our topic today is spirit communication, creating a homemade oracle as a means to speak with the other side. Carrie Paris was in the first class to receive a master's in the cultural study of cosmology and divination from the University of Kent in the UK, and has authored numerous divination products that explore mediumship and ancestral communication through cards and charm casting. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk about one of my favorite things with especially you today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Now, you know that I'm a big fan of your relative tarot and oracle deck, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, for those of you who are somewhat new to the concept of oracles, I know it can be a little confusing. Would you talk just a little bit about the history of mediumship? Let's give a little background.
Sure. Well, mediumship, the way I've studied it and most of my research is based in Victorian and early American mediumship. But mediumship has been, happening since the beginning of time. People have always been communicating with the mysterious, right? The other side, or those who we believe have crossed over and are no longer in, physical form. So, people have been using different forms of tools to communicate with mediums, with those who have crossed over, because they feel like they need to either have a sense of closure, or they need to have some answers, or they just feel like they haven't finished with that particular person in their life. So throughout time, what they've done was they've sought out people who seem to have access to that dialogue and work as a go-between for that communication to occur. So if we do any kind of research, we can see that, again, from time immemorial, that people have been talking with the realm of spirit or the realm of soul, since shamanic cultures all the way up to what we're doing today. But when it really became popular was during the Victorian era or early American era, when there was a lot of death due to civil unrest, civil wars, you name it, poverty, where a lot of people were dying. And so, it brought forward some really interesting characters. And while there was definitely some really true mediums in the world who were communicating and bringing information forward from the other side, there were a lot of charlatans too. And in fact, most of those mediums actually became popular because they could produce things out of midair because they worked in circuses and sideshows. So a lot of magicians, assistants, people who knew how to create, stage magic were able to say that they were communicating with people from the other side, and they would have a lot of tricks literally up their sleeves to do that. But the true medium was the person who didn't require an audience like these stage magicians did or these charlatans did. And instead, what they were offering was something really intimate, where they would offer these kind of like parlor readings so that they could, bring closure and healing to whoever they were working with, the living that they were working with, so that they can move forward with their lives. So mediumship has a wide range of angles to it, but to me, it's really important to understand the difference between, a true medium, someone who can actually feel the other side and have access to that information and deliver it to people who are in need of it. And then, it's also equally important to understand that what a charlatan does, and to differentiate those two. And usually the charlatan is in it for what's known as spectacular entertainment. We actually see that today on television, where all these mediums are walking up to people in supermarkets and saying, your dead grandma wants to talk to you. So there's that spectacular entertainment aspect to it. But you really have to know how to navigate, what is the true medium from the person who's doing it for an entertainment value.
So with that said, I know it can be very confusing. How can someone tell whether the person that they're working with is legitimately giving them information, or if they are faking them out?
I think accuracy is the number one thing. I mean, if they can tell you things and communicate information from the other side that only the sitter or the person who's questioning knows, then you're pretty spot on, but in today's world, it's super easy to access that information, right? So you want to approach a medium with more intimate information that the charlatan can't access, through Facebook or social media or even the newspapers. And I just, I always encourage people to go into this by doing their research, because most of the people who approach a medium or go to a medium, and sadly this is the majority of people that do, they're pretty vulnerable. Death probably has just occurred, or they just have a certain pain in their heart, or a burning question that they desperately wanted answers to. And so it's super easy to for people like that to be taken advantage of. So you really have to look for somebody who has a stellar reputation, and also a stellar reputation because they're accurate. And that accuracy usually comes through them providing the sitter with information that only the sitter knows.
All right, thank you for that. So if somebody wanted to try to access information themselves or make contact with their loved ones themselves, they don't want to go through an intermediary, what advice would you offer to somebody who wants to communicate themselves with the other side?
Yeah, well, those are my favorite people. And I want everybody to be able to do this. In fact, that's why I think my mission on Earth is to make user-friendly products that allow people to do just that. And so one of the studies that I have been fascinated with for well over 10 years now is this idea of casting. And casting is one of the oldest forms of divination we have available to us. Again, we can reach back as far as the earlier shamanic cultures that used found objects like a shell or a wing or a shard of pottery, and they assign meaning to that particular piece. And they would collect these pieces over time and have these baskets filled with these pieces of material or these items that would describe something to the shaman. So in other words, they would symbolize meaning. And so when they would have these, when a sitter would come to them and they would say, I'm feeling a sense of soul loss because my husband died or my child had crossed over too soon, the shaman would then take some of the items from the basket and just kind of cast them out, either onto a pattern on a mat, or, even in the dirt that has a pattern in it, or no pattern at all. And wherever the items would land would have meaning and would describe a story that would help the shaman, communicate a message through those items to the sitter. And so, when we fast forward to today, what I've done is I've borrowed from that very old form of divining, which is casting, and I've created these kits for people to use that would allow them to cast and learn how to read themselves. And so these kits usually consist of little metal charms, the kind of charms that you see on a charm bracelet. So there's like an anchor or a sun or a moon or a dog or a man or a woman. So each of them stand for something, right? And they're super easy to recognize and to read. And if someone is just starting out in the realm of divination and they're mediumship curious, then tools like this make it really accessible to start practicing and to start recognizing the feelings that you receive when you are, in fact, in touch with the other side. So these user-friendly tools are a great start. And, to me, they're like a jumping off point. Then they can lead to other things like tarot or astrology or these other systems that are already in place.
Okay, so does this require special training? Is this something that anybody can do? And can they use items that they already own, or do they need to specifically go out and find things?
So I'm the worst salesperson for my own products, and I say this all the time because I think that if you make your own casting kit, that it's more personal. If you customize something around your own understanding of what symbols mean, then it's going to mean a lot more to you, and it's going to communicate a lot better for you because you have a relationship with those pieces. Anybody can do this. I do believe in training, and I do recommend that. But I also recommend that you start making your own divination kits or your own casting kits specifically for spirit communication or animal communication or elemental communication, whatever it is, the unseen communication. And so, a lot of the time when I actually teach this a lot, where I have people just go to their junk drawers or open their handbags and pick out 5 items just for the fun of it, without thinking, just randomly quickly pick or choose 5 items. And once you have those items laid out, then, ask yourself a few questions to start changing it from this very literal piece of, whatever you found into something more symbolic, and then something that can be used to help you communicate with the other side. So, for example, if you were to, pick a pen, out of your bag or out of your junk drawer, I would have them ask 3 questions. The first is, what is it literally? Well, it's a pen, right? Well, what is its purpose, right? So the pen's purpose is to write. It helps you remember things. It helps you open packages when you can't find your scissors anywhere, right? So, but then, what could it stand for you? And that's when you start taking it from that very literal place to its purpose, to what it can do for you. And so your relationship with that will be totally different than most people's, because everybody has their own relationship with it. Well, this particular pen reminds me of the time when my grandfather taught me how to write poetry, or something like that. So that would be the item that you found that communicates grandparents then. So do you see how that works? It's kind of this way of taking tools that are more personal to you that help you develop a kit that can speak not only for yourself, but for everybody. So if you're actually doing a reading for somebody and they select that pen, then chances are pretty good that the conversation is going to be based around your grandparents.
All right. So I know you said that you're not a very good pitch person for your own product. So let me do this for you. I love the relative tarot. As you know, you and I have talked about this in the past.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. It's the relative tarot, and you also added an additional spirit oracle deck in with that. So talk a bit about how that can help people communicate with the other side.
Sure, and thank you. The Spirit Oracle. So first of all, I made a tarot deck based on this idea that I think that tarot readers make great mediums. In fact, a lot of our readings get hijacked by this other presence that often comes in, and most tarot readers don't know what to do with that, because they're not in it to be mediums. They're in it to be tarot readers or tarot diviners. So I wanted to create a deck that would honor ancestry, honor mediumship work, and then also help a diviner be a little bit more prepared if anything else like that comes along into their reading. And so, the tarot aspect is there. It can totally be used as a tarot deck, but also a deck for mediums. My goal in life is not only to re-enchant the world, but it's also to make divination, spirit communication, user-friendly. So I wanted to add an oracle, an added addition of deck or cards into those decks that would make it super accessible, the spirit communications. So the spirit deck or the spirit oracle is filled with cards that have photographs that are taken from old cabinet cards or images that people sent in to me of their own relatives. And they each have a single title under them, kind of like addiction or home and hearth or loyalty. And so when you lay those cards out on a table, you can, jump to a topic by one of the cards, or you can create sentences by drawing all the cards out together on a table. There's all kinds of things you can do. But the whole idea really is to help people start having a conversation with the other side really quickly.
Right. And for me, they've been very, very effective, very helpful, sometimes mind-blowing. But sometimes you get a card where you're asking a specific question, you're even asking a specific person to communicate with you, and you get this card and you look at it and you go, I have no idea what this means. What do you do when you get a card that you don't understand?
Yeah, so that happens a lot. And I think the number one thing is just to be really patient with yourself and try not to get frustrated or discouraged. But instead, to me, that's an invitation to ask more questions or to take a different direction. So let's say the card of the invitation card comes up. There's a woman standing with a chair, an empty chair, and she's kind of inviting you to come in and sit down. So, and your question was about cooking, your old grandma's recipe, like, how do I remember that recipe? So, the two would seem like they wouldn't really interact very well. So one of the things that you can do is similar to what I was describing with when you create your own casting kit, is you look at the card and you look at it literally. That always starts the conversation. This is what I do with my sitters, is when they just, they go into that certain kind of body language where, they kind of, do this and kind of lock up or hold their throat. It means they can't bring the information forward. But when you ask somebody, especially people who are learning to divine, to describe the image literally, kind of breaks the ice, right? And that's what you need to do in those situations when you are stuck or you feel clueless, just describe it literally. So in this particular case, well, there's a card, and there's a woman in the card. We'll describe the woman. Well, she looks like she's from a certain time. I think it's in the early 1800s. And she's sitting in back of a chair, and the chair is empty, and she's just kind of leaning there. What does that stand for you? What are you leaning into right now that has an older association or an old era feeling? And that's where the dialogue starts, really opening and unfolding, if you will. And so if you give yourself that opportunity to kind of, loosen up a little bit and be curious instead of critical of the fact that you don't have the answers right away by asking questions, then I'm pretty sure that like 99% of the time, the answers will start flowing again.
All right. So if you draw a card that the picture really speaks to you, it jumps out at you, but the word at the bottom of the card doesn't ring any bells at all, is it okay to go ahead and just ignore that word, or should you look at the word and try to actually analyze it and figure out how does it fit in?
There's a lot of us in the cardomancy world, the world of card diviners, where we take our decks and we cut the titles off. Because we feel that we don't want that word to influence the beautiful art that is already occurring for us. Diviners speak in symbol. And so when we have these words at the bottom of cards, that should be a jumping point. But after that, just if your mind goes to the word first, great, use it. If it doesn't make any sense to you, please go into the imagery and start asking yourself questions that feed your divination, that nurture your divination in a way that has probably nothing to do with the words on the cards.
All right. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Now, the deck itself, I know that you created them by, you have a group of people who are, they donated their cards to you, the photos of their ancestors. When you were actually creating the deck, would you get messages from the people whose photos were being used?
Yeah, it got kind of loud in my art studio after a while. The deck wasn't supposed to be a deck at all. It was one of those beautiful mistakes that happens, where it was just before New Year's, like in 2012, I think it was, that my mom gave me a box of old photographs. And in one of those photographs was a picture of my relatives, where it was my great Nona and her husband, and then they had a child in front of them, and nobody knows who the child is. And they're in Italy, they're in southern Italy, and they're in total poverty, no shoes, their bellies are distended, their teeth are gone. And I kind of grew up with this picture at my own grandmother's house, and nobody knew who the child was. And when I opened this box and I saw this picture, I thought, wow, I want to do something with this image that would kind of heal my ancestral line and let him know that even though he was a mystery to us, that we're okay. We're doing okay now. We're not in that situation that they were in, but instead we're doing much better, I think. And so I took that image, scanned it, and I took a piece of tarot imagery, which is called a pentacle or a coin, and I made it super big, which represents, finances and wealth and, everything in the world of the physical matter. And I put it in his hands. I kind of overlaid it in his hands, and I posted it on Facebook, and all these people were really excited about it and said, hey, will you do my ancestors' pictures, these photographs. So one thing led to another. And I started getting all these great photographs from people, and, and I still didn't think, oh, this should be a tarot deck. I was just like playing with these cards and really loving the idea that I was communicating with their relatives, and, we were, healing certain topics in their ancestral line through imagery and art. And after a while, I finally, got wise to it and created a deck. But I created a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, where people started sending in their imagery, and then we created this deck together. Really, it was really a team effort, because, this deck is filled with people's ancestors. I mean, all of these are old cabinet cards and photographs of people's ancestry overlaid with tarot imagery. And it's alive because their ancestors and my ancestors are in this deck.
I love this so much. In fact, the deck includes all different races. In the tarot deck, you allow for same-sex orientation, like the Lover's card. You have 3 cards where there's male, female, there's male, male, and female, female. So people can customize their decks. But speaking of having all this inclusion, which is just wonderful, if you're pulling cards and you're wishing to speak with your ancestors and you're white and the person on the card is of a different coloring, how do you interpret that? Does it matter?
I don't think it matters, but it's an interesting thing when that does happen, because I always have to ask is, when this happened before in a reading, it was a very Caucasian sitter pulled this card where there are these 2 women who are clearly from India that are dancing together. And, the first thing I asked was, do you have any Indian ancestry? And she went, there's this rumor in my family. And so I don't know if she did it or not, but she was going to go do her DNA thing and, all of that. But, that might come up. It doesn't always come up, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is the message that you're able to get. That same card, even though the women are from India, it's also 2 women who are dancing together, right? So, what does that mean to you? And so that would be more important in the divination than the actual DNA of the person on the card.
All right. So it seems that basically you just need to be open to whatever information is coming through and be playful and not be terribly literal. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds really accurate. I should have put that in the book. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, good. Now, I'm noticing that, and I'm sure you are too, that more and more people are really open to exploring this topic, communicating with the other side, as it were. Perhaps it's because of COVID, but even before the whole pandemic hit, people seem to be opening up to this. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because we have so much access to information. And again, we're in that realm of spectacular entertainment. I mean, there isn't a channel that isn't on right now where someone isn't talking about somebody who crossed over, so they went and saw a medium, or there isn't a show where, there are so many shows, I should say, that are available where you can actually see a medium in action with an audience. And that's, again, that spectacular entertainment that I was talking about. And it kind of plays with, that when I was doing my research on early Victorian mediums, is that, the popularity of a medium during those times was happening at the exact same time that the electronic telegraph was invented. So you can almost compare both audiences. So you would see a medium and he or she would have, this audience around them, or they would be a stage medium. And, they would be delivering and communicating this information out into the audience, and they would be the tool for that, right? The conduit for that. And you could look at that same exact example when these inventors they would be on a stage, and they would be showing how the electronic telegraph worked, which is another form of communication. There'd be an audience around them. And so that's actually where the phrase spectacular entertainment came from. So that, they would have these audience and people would be just like, oh, this is spectacular and entertaining at the same time. So nothing really has changed that much. We have these mediums on YouTube and on, all these, regular network television programs where, these mediums will be on, and they'll have these audiences, and they'll be delivering information. They'll be that conduit, just like they were in the 1800s, offering, again, another form of spectacular entertainment. So it's popularized because it's so mysterious, right? And it's so fascinating that you can't help but be engaged, right? It's just so entertaining. But I'm not totally thrilled with that kind of popularity of this particular topic, even though I'm also fascinated by it. I'm more interested in how people can empower themselves to communicate with the other side and to find that answer that they've been seeking through their own means. And that's why I like to make these user-friendly products, because it is available to us. We just have to practice.
Right. So then you mentioned your kit earlier. Let's talk about that a little bit. What exactly does it include?
So about 7 years ago, I think it was, my really good friend and colleague, Andrew McGregor up in Canada, he was doing a lot of really fantastic ancestral work. And I was doing mediumship work, and I was also doing casting. So I called him and I said, I think it's time we joined forces and created a kit and a course just for people who are, mediumship curious and want something that's more accessible to them. And so we developed a course and a tin with all of these charms and pieces in it that people could apply meaning to, or they were pieces that would often occur within a mediumship reading, like, for example, a silver pipe would represent somebody who smoked a pipe in a life, or a horse might represent, somebody who was into transportation or worked on a farm. So we had like 100 pieces in the kit. And then it came with a scarf that was kind of a map for communicating with whoever it was that you were communicating with. So that's what these kits include. And I've made, 10 different varieties of kits over time. But again, the goal is always to, help people feel confident in the fact that they actually do have access to the other side, and they actually can talk to people on the other side. It just probably won't look the same as we see with the televised mediums, that spectacular entertainment that I was talking about earlier.
Right. That makes so much sense. Now, we've sort of touched on this previously, but I want to just sort of clarify that when it comes to divining, interpreting, et cetera, it seems almost like interpreting dreams, where if you're interpreting your own dream, if the book that you look up a symbol in, that snakes mean this thing, but to you, a snake means something entirely different. You should choose what it means to you as opposed to what somebody else is saying, correct?
Absolutely. 100%. Okay. That's the case. Yeah.
Okay. So then when you're creating your own sort of language that you use in your own personal process, is that changeable as well, or should you stick with what comes to you the first time?
It will change over time. I'm positive that will happen. And when that does, keep a record of it. We always ask people to create a lexicon of their own language. I mean, that symbol is so elusive and interesting, and it morphs in so many different ways to so many different people, and culturally it morphs a lot too. But like for example, the snake, some people might be really afraid of snakes, or they see them as something that's dangerous, to whereas other people might see it as a form of transformation because they shed their skin, or it might mean a windy road, or bad pipes or good pipes, but usually what happens for me is when, a symbol changes is when I'm actually with a sitter, and I'll hear them say something that I'd never even considered before. So not to say that I will take all of those newfound meanings on, but it does make me more open to the possibility that meaning might come up for somebody else.
Okay. All right. So, geez, I've got so many questions and we've got so little time. I guess I should ask, what does the future hold for you? You've got all these fun toys. What's coming up?
More toys. That's what is going to happen. I do, since COVID, I used to travel a lot and teach pretty much all over the world. And I'm now kind of forced to be at home and to recreate things that I've been putting off. So I have some more tarot decks coming out and more casting kits. And I'm just teaching a lot online right now. I've just signed up for some 1-year courses for my Chinese students. And, I'm actually busier now than I've ever been. So I'm looking ahead for more toys, like you called them, but also toys that are, again, super user friendly and hopefully inspire people to go into those deeper levels of divination that's calling them.
All right. Well, I sure look forward to your new toys. I just love the relative tarot and oracle deck so much. This is a big commercial for Carrie's deck. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make you blush. Now, people can find you at carrieparis.com. Is that accurate?
Yep, it is. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for what you said. That means a lot. I love the fact that I can do this for a living, and when I hear people like you say, that they're using the product, it just thrills me.
Well, I'm truly into ancestral healing. So again, these decks are wonderfully helpful for me. Now, I have one last question. I've been asking a lot of people in this summit because this is the Beyond the Veil Summit. What, in your view, is the veil? Why can't we easily communicate back and forth? What's between us? So when people use the word veil, I think they take that from Gaelic terms, and it lifts and it's thick, and there's times of the year where it's more open than others. But to me, it's more of a portal. And, what is beyond that is soul, is spirit, is universe. But I don't want to suggest that it's only over there, because it's also here. So really that portal is just the handshake. It's that liminal space where you decide that you're going to kind of take leave or keep an anchor, I should say, in this everyday reality and reach into the portal and create that handshake with this other reality. And in that handshake, you're creating a partnership that allows you to converse and hopefully exchange information that you can bring back to the world of matter. And to me, that's what that veil represents. So there's really not a lot of separation. It's just a portal
that, for me, that's how I'm describing it, that allows me to, kind of bring information back and forth.
All right. And I'm glad you mentioned that at different times of the year, it seems to be thinner, because this summit airs the week of Halloween or Samhain, depending on how you prefer to call it. So how can we use this thinning of the veil?
Oh, it's such a great time. I love it. If you follow nature, and if you're lucky enough to spend time outdoors, which a lot of us are doing actually right now, just follow nature's lead. This is the time where the leaves are falling, everything's changing, the light is changing. We're kind of we're starting to go within. And it's at those times that we are, more introspective, and that always leads to the deeper answers and the deeper questions, but it also leads to, communicating with the other side. And, the light is just perfect for it, depending on where you live. Hopefully there's not a lot of, artificial light going on, but the light, if you can go out into nature, is just perfect for you to notice, this portal opening, this veil lifting, if you just soften your gaze to it. And there's a lot of different things you can do to make that happen. But all of this is to say is that, utilize that time, because it's the start of the season of introspection and deep introspection. And in that deep introspection, that's where you have those deeper questions and the more meaningful answers and deeper conversations with the other side.
All right, beautiful. Thank you for adding that bit of information. We are just about out of time here, but before we go, let me ask, is there anything that we haven't discussed or anything that's come to mind before we wrap up?
My big message to the world, and again, this seems to be my job, is to really encourage people to not get discouraged when you start divining for yourself, or not to be too critical if you're going to pursue a conversation with the other side, but instead stay in curiosity. Ask questions. Just keep asking questions over and over and over again until your answer comes to you. A divination doesn't end when, the cards are put away or the casting items are put away. It actually begins. And that's an invitation for you to continue having a dialogue with the information that you received from your particular divination. So, in this world where, we have instant gratification and instant Googled answers, divination doesn't like to work that way. It likes to have a dance with you. It likes to be seduced. It likes to have you ask questions over and over and over again, have these very long conversations with it. And in doing that, you enrich the experience, you manifest what you're trying to manifest, and you also become a better diviner with, better ears that can hear the message that are ready to come through.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Carrie, for being with us today. It's always a pleasure talking with you. I wish we had more time. We could talk for hours and hours, but thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much. This has really been wonderful. It's great to see you again, too.
Absolutely. It's so good to see you, too. Once again, this is Carrie Paris. I want to thank everybody for being with us today, and I hope you enjoyed this session in the Beyond the Veil Summit.
Thank you for joining us for the Beyond the Veil Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit beyondtheveilsummit.com. To join our global community of people awakening to their divine humanity and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for gathering with us and for sharing this healing path with your friends and family.